You're 22, kneeling on a dirt lane outside a row of thatched houses, when a cart of cloaked men rattles past. One of them pauses, eyes like flint, and watches you braid herbs into a small cloth bundle. He doesn't ask. He studies your hands, your face, the way you hold your breath, like a butcher judging meat. He tosses a coin to the boy who runs errands and moves on. You feel the weight of his gaze long after he's gone. Word travels fast in a village. A plague in the next town. A noble's fever. A child who won't wake. People whisper your name like a charm and a curse. You're a healer. Not a learned physician with Latin and parchment, but a street healer. Herbs, poultices, prayers, and a stubborn set of hands that have coaxed life back into more than one pale body. That's enough to make you useful. That's also enough to make you dangerous. You learned your trade from your grandmother, who taught you which roots stop a cough and which flowers make a fever break. She taught you to read the color of a tongue like a map, to listen to a chest like a drum, to know when a wound needed binding and when it needed to be left to breathe. You learned to barter. A loaf of bread for a poultice, a spool of thread for a poultice, a promise of prayers for a night's shelter. You learned to move fast, to treat in alleys and doorways, to keep your hands clean with vinegar and your mouth shut about who you'd helped. Because in a world where sickness is a mystery and death a neighbor, knowledge is a double-edged knife. At first, the work is small and steady. A farmer's son with a fever, a midwife who needs a salve for a tear, an old man with a cough that rattles like a cartwheel. You mix, you bind, you soothe. People call you a saint when you save a life and a witch when you fail. The line between miracle and menace is thin. One winter, you save a child from a fever with a bitter tea and a warm bed. The mother weeps and presses a coin into your palm. The next spring, a woman's baby dies despite your poultices, and the same mother spits at you in the market, calling you a poisoner. You learn to swallow both praise and spit without flinching. Survival is a lesson in keeping your face neutral and your hands steady. Then the plague comes closer. It arrives like a rumor at first. A caravan that didn't stop. A priest who refused to enter a house. People lock their doors and hang herbs from lintels. You keep working because what else can you do? The sick still need you. You move from cottage to cottage, your satchel heavy with vinegar, willow bark, and a handful of prayers. You patch wounds, you steam chests, you hold hands while fever dreams tear at the edges of a person's mind. You learn the smell of death, a sweet rot under the tongue, a silence that sits like a stone. You learn to step back when the signs are there, to fold your hands and say the words that make families feel less alone. But stepping back doesn't keep you safe. You breathe the same air, touch the same linens, and the plague does not care for your skill or your kindness. Rumors begin to twist your work into something darker. A neighbor's husband dies and the neighbor points at you, eyes wide with grief and accusation. She touched him, they say. She cursed him. The local priest, who once blessed your poultices, now watches you with a thin smile. He asks questions about your herbs, about the prayers you whisper. He asks where you learned your craft. You answer with the truth, your grandmother's hands, the old books she kept hidden. But truth is a poor shield against fear. Fear needs a scapegoat. You become convenient. One night, men with lanterns come to your door. They don't knock politely. They shove it open and step inside like they own the dark. They search your bundles, upturn your jars, sniff at your salves as if scent could prove guilt. They find a scrap of a forbidden text, a herbal compendium with notes in the margins, and their faces change. The priest reads a passage aloud, twisting the words into something that sounds like a spell. You try to explain. It's medicine, not malice. They don't listen. They bind your wrists with rough rope and drag you to the square. The crowd gathers, hungry for a spectacle. Some faces you know, some you don't. The same hands that once handed you bread now point and hiss. You stand on a wooden platform, the sun baking your shoulders, and the priest speaks of sin and sorcery. He calls you a witch, a poisoner, a servant of the devil. He tells the crowd that your herbs are not cures but curses, that your prayers are not prayers but invocations. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down. Superstition, ignorance, the need to explain the unexplainable. You try to speak, to tell them about willow bark and fever, about poultices and poultice making, about the nights you sat up with a child and watched the color return to their cheeks. Your voice is small against the roar. A woman in the crowd remembers how you saved her brother and cries out in your defense. But the priest's words are louder. The magistrate, who once took your coin for a quick remedy, looks away. They don't kill you outright. Not yet. Instead, they humiliate you. They shave your head, a public stripping of identity. They smear your face with ash and parade you through the lanes so everyone can see the witch among them. Children throw stones. A man you once healed spits in your hair. You are led to the river where they dunk you to see if you float. A cruel test that confuses physics with faith. You sink, coughing, and the crowd gasps. They call it a sign. They call it proof. They bind you to a stake and set a small fire, more for show than for death, to scare others into obedience. You scream, not from the flames but from the betrayal. The woman whose child you saved earlier throws herself between you and the crowd and pays a bribe to the magistrate. You are spared the worst, but the message is clear. Your life is no longer your own. After that, you live in the margins. People still come to you in secret, slipping coins under floorboards, whispering their ailments in the dark. You treat them in back alleys, in barns, in the shadow of the church where the priest's gaze cannot reach. You learn to be invisible. You learn to hide your herbs in hollowed loaves and to write your notes in code. You teach a few trusted apprentices. A boy with nimble fingers, a widow with steady hands, because knowledge is a weapon that must be passed on. But every patient is a risk. Every saved life is a potential accusation. You sleep with one eye open, listening for the creak of boots, the hush of a cloak. Years pass and the world shifts. New remedies arrive with traveling physicians, who carry Latin and arrogance. They look down on your poultices and call your methods crude. They bring new cures and new dangers, expensive treatments that only the wealthy can afford, and new suspicions that your old ways are obsolete or worse, subversive. The magistrate who once took your bribe now takes his son to a physician with a foreign tongue. You watch as your place in the village erodes, not because your skill failed, but because power and money change the rules. You keep working because the sick still need hands that know how to bind and soothe. Then a child you treated years ago grows into a man who remembers your kindness. He becomes a scribe for a noble and one day returns with a letter that changes everything. The noble has fallen ill and the physicians have failed. The scribe remembers the woman who saved his sister and begs you to come. You go, because what else can you do? You mix your herbs, you steam his chest, you press poultices to his skin. The noble's fever breaks. He lives. Word spreads, but this time it spreads differently. The noble thanks you publicly, offers you coin and protection. For a while, you breathe easier. You teach more apprentices openly. You open a small stall by the market where people can come without fear. You think perhaps the worst is behind you, but peace is fragile. A new priest arrives, zealous and hungry for influence. He sees your stall as a threat to his sermons. He whispers to the magistrate about heresies and hidden texts. He points to the old rumor like a map to a treasure. The noble who once protected you is called away by war. Without his shield, the old suspicions creep back. One night, men come again. This time they take your apprentices, too. They accuse them of learning witchcraft. They burn a few of your books in the square, pages curling like dying leaves. You try to bargain, to plead, to show your remedies, but the law is a blunt instrument when fear sharpens it. You are dragged before a tribunal that pretends to be fair. They ask you to explain the science of your herbs, to recite the prayers you whisper. They demand proof that your hands heal and do not harm. You show them scars from years of work, calluses from stirring decoctions, the faded ink of your grandmother's notes. They call it evidence of witchcraft. They sentence you to exile. Leave the village and never return. It's a mercy compared to the stake, but exile is a slow death. You gather what you can carry. A few jars, a satchel, the memory of a child's smile, and you walk away from the only home you've known. On the road, you meet other healers wandering like you, carrying knowledge like contraband. You trade recipes in whispers, you swap stories of burned books and saved lives. You teach a new generation how to hide remedies in plain sight, how to speak of medicine without invoking fear. You learn that being a healer in the Middle Ages is not just about herbs and hands. It's about politics, superstition, and the fragile mercy of those in power. You learn that every cure can be turned into a crime by someone who needs a scapegoat. Years later, you return in secret to the village under the cover of night. The market is smaller, the church steeple taller, and the magistrate older. You slip into a doorway and find a child with a fever, eyes glassy and distant. You kneel, hands steady, and mix a bitter tea. The child drinks and sleeps. The mother weeps and presses a coin into your palm, but you refuse it. You leave before dawn, your heart heavy and your hands stained with the work you cannot stop doing. You are a healer, and the world will always need you, but it will never fully accept you. You carry your craft like a secret, a dangerous light in a dark time. Click the card now to learn the cutthroat truths of street medicine, where every remedy could save a life or end one.